Hi guys. Okay, so what we're going to be talking to you guys are all about terrorism. We're going to explain what it is, the types of terrorism. We're going to talk about the stats, how it's affected the world. We're going to talk about some solutions of it too. And then we're also going to be giving many examples throughout the questions. So yeah.
What is terrorism?
Now the word terrorism, there are a lot of ways to define it. There are many ways to define terrorism, but how many of you guys realize it or know it is by the definition of it being the threat and use of force against civilians to help bring out political and/or social change. It is a criminal act that influences the audience beyond the victim. It draws attention to the locals, the government, and especially the world in general. Terrorists' ultimate goal is that 1 billion people are watching and to be introduced to fear.
What are the 3 roles of terrorism?
The 3 main roles are the terrorists, the victims, and the general publics. The terrorists do not see them as evil though. All they want to do is fight for what they believe in and to settle nothing less, just for them to achieve their goals. The victim sees the terrorist as a criminal with no regard for human life. Now the general publics, they view them as the most unstable, but some people think of the general public view as their main cause for being a terrorist.
What are the types of terrorism?
State terrorism is the use of terror by a government in order to control its population. A great example of that is during the French Revolution. It was widely spread and almost every dictator utilized state terrorism as a way of controlling their populations. Now right-wing terrorism, that aims to combat liberal government and preserve traditional social orders. An example is how the KKK is not only in the United States, but also in Germany, Russia, and many others.
What are the stats around the world?
Since the 1970s to the present day, domestic, transitional, and international have occurred greatly. It's been more than 104,000 cases. After the 9/11 attacks, terrorists have carried out over 20,000 deadly terrors, killing millions of people. Their attacks include more than 47,000 bombings, 14,000 assassinations, and 53 kidnappings. There are around 256 international terrorist groups. Mostly, 60% of the groups are Muslim extremists that are groups fighting over the demand of either Sharia rules or revenge against America for invading Afghanistan, Iraq, and other Bay countries. The difference between a freedom fighter and a terrorist.
The difference between a freedom fighter and a terrorist is someone who belongs to a group of people who encourage and practice terrorism. A terrorist is also someone who terrorizes citizens from other countries. And then a freedom fighter is someone who is a part of a violent conflict to achieve a political goal to overthrow the government.
How do terrorist groups use social media to recruit and radicalize the youth?
Terrorist groups use social media to promote their radical campaign by using a deceptive approach that shows a sophisticated understanding of how their terrorist group is successful. This strategy misleads viewers into supporting and joining a terrorist group. Terrorists use Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and other social medias to advertise their aggressive campaign. Social media websites that terrorist groups use are viewed worldwide, which is informing and recruiting potential terrorist groups around the world.
Are military drones that fire missiles a form of terrorism?
Military drones are a form of terrorism because countries can use the UAV to target, spy, and attack a person or a group of people. A UAV is an unmanned aerial vehicle, also known as drones. Drones have many benefits, including identifying targets from an aerial view. However, it has its limitations. Drones are not 100% accurate when identifying a specific target. As a result, many civilians die due to being mistaken for the target. Since drones are unmanned aerial vehicles, they can be abused by people for personal gains. Drone attacks have been increasing throughout the past few years. For example, research shows that since 2006, there have been 82 drone attacks in Pakistan, which resulted in 750 to 1,000 deaths. An unmanned drone and an aerial vehicle that is manned both can cause the same amount of violence and damage. Therefore, drones are a form of terrorism.
Nothing in the Quran encourages terrorism. The Quran and the Hadith are the two primary sources of Islamic law.
What does Al Qaeda want in these terrorist attacks?
No one knows for sure what motivates terrorists to do such horrific acts. On 9/11, they left no statement at all of their aims or purposes, nor has any group has taken responsibility. The motivation may have nothing at all to do with these religious commitments. Their intent was to kill many people and disrupt life in human society.
Is there anything in Islam that leads to suicide bombings or terrorism?
Nothing in Islam leads to terrorism or suicide bombings. Suicide is strongly prohibited in Islam because no one has the right to take away the life that God has given them. In Islam, one can only fight a just war, which is fought in self-defense, not as an act of aggression, and is to be between two groups of military personnel, not with civilians.
What are the solutions to terrorism?
Terrorism is a worldwide problem that we have yet to figure out how to solve. Terrorism is a conflict between people and countries fighting over power. One possible solution to terrorism is for the richer countries to help empower the people being victimized by terrorism. By helping them rebuild their economy, jobs will be created and people will be able to help themselves. Education is another indirect solution for terrorism. It has been proven that by providing children with a good education from an early age, it helps increase their quality of life, better living conditions, and job opportunities. Terrorists usually recruit from poor, uneducated countries. So, these are some ways we can help solve or prevent terrorism until we find a more effective way to solve terrorism.